Hi, my name is Daniel. Today I would like to show you how I think you should create your container database. I use the Database Configuration Assistant to create databases, and I find that in the Oracle Home. I bring up the GUI to create my first database. I want to create a database, and here on the second page I choose Advanced Configuration. Otherwise, I won't be able to make all the tweaks that I really want. The next page, I can choose which template to use. I select Custom Database, and notice here that it says Include Data Files No. This means that DBCA will create that database completely from scratch using the Create Database statement. The other two templates, Include Data Files Yes, means that we have RMAN backups of completely empty databases that we can restore. But since that is a pre-created database stored in a backup set, it doesn't give me all the flexibility that I want. If I select the View Details for instance, I can see the amount of components that is already installed, and this is where I would like to make some tweaks. So using one of those with the data files doesn't make any sense. Custom database is the way to go. I give it a name. It's called CDB, 5. Could be a good name. And use local undo. This is very important. It allows you to use, for instance, hot cloning. So always set that on, which is the default, I think, since 12.2. I select to create an empty container database. I don't want any PDBs, but do whatever you want here. Okay, may have a potential conflict. Not really. This would be, for instance, if I have RAG databases where the instance number is a suffix to the SID. So this is a warning I can disregard. So here you can put in whatever preference you have, fast recovery area, the listener. Now I have the database components. On the left-hand side, I have the components which I will install in the root container. I suggest that you create the components that you need and not more than that. So in multi-tenant, the root container must have the components which you install in the PDB. So the amount of components in your root container must be a superset of what you have in your PDBs. So let's imagine in my organization we use Oracle JVM, we also use Oracle Text, but OLAP we never use that, and Spatial we never use that, so I tick those off. Why? Well, the number of components you have in your databases has a direct influence on the time it takes to upgrade and patch your database. And also from a kind of least privilege sort of way, don't install more stuff than you actually need. So keep your root containers lean, but install all the components that you would eventually need. On the right-hand side, include in PDBs. This tells us what we will put into the PDB $seed. So remember, we use that PDB to provision new PDBs. So I would recommend that you tick everything off here so that we get a seed container which is very small, very lean. If you need one of the components in that PDB later on when you provision a new PDB and you need, for instance, JVM, well, then you can simply just install that either by calling DBCA again and install the component, or just call a script from SQL+. That's very easy and usually doesn't even require a restart of the PDB. So this would be my preferred recommendation for components. Install the stuff that you need in the root container, but keep the PDBs nice and lean. On the configuration options page, there's one thing to pay attention to, and that's the character set. Always use the default, which is AL32 UTF-8. If you use that in your root container, then you can plug in any PDB that you want with any character set. You can have one PDB with a US 7-bit ASCII, you can have one with a Japanese character set, one with Eastern Europe, one with Western Europe, and so forth. As soon as you move away from the defaults, when the root container is, for instance, this character set, all the PDBs must be the same character set. So give yourself the flexibility of having multiple character sets and always go with the default. Let's move on. I need to specify some credentials. I give it a simple password. Hopefully in your organization you use different passwords and you use strong password. This is a lab only, so I can go ahead and be lazy. On the creation option page, go to all initialization parameters. There's one parameter that I would like to pay attention to, and that is the compatible. I would recommend that you always go with the default of the release that you're creating the container database on. Here I'm creating a 26 AI database, and the default compatible setting is 23.6.0. Why is it important? Well, in multi-tenant, it is nice to have the flexibility to move your PDBs around. But any PDB in your container database must have the same compatible as in your root container. If you move your PDBs around, when you plug in, the PDBs will silently and without confirmation take the compatible setting of the root container. So if I plug in a PDB to this container database, the compatible setting in that PDB will automatically be set to this parameter. But remember, compatible can only go up. So if I take a PDB from this container database, now with compatible 23.6, and try to plug into a CDB with a lower compatible setting, that won't work. Next, on the summary page, I choose Save Response File. And I'll save my response file and replace it. That's perfectly fine. Now I could go ahead and click Finish to actually create the CDB, but I want to show you something else. This is the convenient way using the GUI with all the options. It's very easy to create the CDB exactly as I want it. But for the next container database and the next again, you probably want to do that in an automated fashion, either using scripts or automation. Now that I have my control file, let's see how it actually looks. So go to my home directory and I edit the response file. This is a simple text response file that you can very easily edit either manually or through automation. For instance, here I have the global name. I created mine with CDB 5. Let's imagine that we want to create CDB 34. We can just do that. We need to edit the SID as well. And I can go through all the settings, making the changes as I want. If we move down further, we can see the components. Let me find those. Oops, we have them here. PDB options, DB options. So here we have all the components installed in our root container. So let's imagine that we don't really use Oracle text after all. That was a mistake. We can just set that component to false. If we scroll down even further, we have here all the initialization parameters. I would need to change the DB name as well to 34, and perhaps I want to change some of the other parameters, memory parameters, processes, whatever. So once I have the response file that I want, I can then run DBCA in silent mode. Now I can create the database or a new database if I change the response file by calling DBCA in silent mode, and I pass in the response file that we just saw. Perfect for automation, perfect for scripting. I get a few warnings that we saw in the GUI as well, and I can put in my passwords. They don't conform to Oracle standards, that's perfectly fine. And now DBCA goes ahead and create the database. For automation or for scripting, you can put the sys and system password into the response file, and then DBCA won't prompt you. And now we are creating a brand new database completely according to our corporate policies, or my corporate policies, my preferred settings. Very easy, very handy. Thank you so much for watching, and good luck creating your own custom container database.